The episode kicks off with a high school meeting discussing mundane stuff and overreacting to things like the drama teacher wanting to put on Jesus Christ Superstar, despite the effect that would have on delicate sensibilities. It's what you expect. The small-town, uptight, fundamentalist, ultra-conservative, we disapprove of sex standing up because that can lead to dancing Christian stereotype.
Deborah, why don't you lead us in the prayer?
Yeah, here it comes.
In the name of the lords of darkness, rulers of the earth, kings of the underworld, I command the forces of darkness to bestow their infernal power upon me.
But as you can see, unless this prayer is from the Gospel according to Lord Sauron, this is that with the exception that these are uptight Satanists instead. After the truth is out there, we find a group of high school students coming out to the wilderness to perform a ritual from the church of I'm gonna get me some. The guys are hoping that the creepy will turn the girls on because this is where black magic was supposed to have been done. I'm guessing it's the whole girls like bad boys thing, though I suppose there's a difference between riding a motorcycle and carousing with the minions of the devil. Case in point, the unholy chorus that begins chanting around them, and then the plague of rats. That's not going to be tickling the ovaries there, guys. One of the girls runs off, and the guy pursuing her gets caught by someone off screen, and faster than you can say doodly doodly doodly, Mulder and Scully are investigating his murder. Unlike other episodes, there's no reason given for why Mulder and Scully should be up here. No one contacted them about it, and the case is too fresh for Mulder to have stumbled across it as an X-File, and there's barely enough time between finding the body and now for them to have come all the way from Washington to New Hampshire. Not unless they used witchcraft. The sheriff seems to believe in it, certainly. That's what's supposed to go on in these woods. And the eyes and heart of the victim have been removed, which, despite Scully's comments, does seem a bit on the weird side. Of course, as Mulder points out, this isn't about witchcraft. This is about, well, Satanism. Of course, the sheriff's kind of clueless. He assumed that the kid must have been out here alone.
Well, most people don't set out to drink 2 six-packs by themselves.
Yeah, people like that are losers. I'm so lonely. After the sheriff's gone, Mulder does say that the area has a creepy vibe to it, which Scully denies, even as it starts raining frogs. I'm not impressed. If the devil wants to make a point, dropping some frogs out of the sky is the equivalent of saying, oh yeah? Scully's response is even worse, though.
Mulder, toads just fell from the sky.
Yes? Anything to add to that, Special Agent No Shit? They also found the fragment of the book that had been used during the ritual, and Mulder tracks it back to this kid, Mr. Cool, who on seeing 2 agents come in figures he'll run for it, which he explains later was because he fears that he had called up the devil or something, and of course the devil often shows up disguised as its government employees. The actual little Satan's helpers are in the next room, and coincidentally, they're all the ones in town apparently because they're convinced one of the 4 of them had to have done it. There's nobody else who knows about these rituals. It does make sense, though. You will have access to the power of the Lord of Darkness himself, but it will come at a most terrible price. Oh, sure, I was expecting that. What is it, ass full of hot coals, worms feasting on my flesh? Ha ha ha, foolish mortal! You shall become a high school teacher! No! There's 2 kind of ironic things about this situation. First, that they're not only Satanists, they're lapsed Satanists, that this evil threat can succumb to the same issues as any mainstream religion in that regard. The other is that they hide their beliefs by acting like their mainstream counterparts, putting in the old occult influences on all this stuff like music and television, knowing full well that that has nothing to do with it, because if it was, they probably wouldn't be lapsed Satanists, would they? Scully insists that there is no evidence of an occult conspiracy.
Look, if the number of murders attributed to occult conspiracies were true, it would mean thousands of people killing tens of thousands of people a year without evidence, without being exposed. It would be the greatest criminal conspiracy in the history of civilization.
Thank you! But despite Scully's insistence that this is just a routine homicide involving eyes and heart being ritualistically removed from a high school student, Mulder shows that there is magic at work, like the water going down the drain counterclockwise, which could only mean black magic, as opposed to the dozens of rational reasons, including that the Coriolis effect isn't strong enough to affect a drinking fountain. It would only be more implausible if Mulder suggested magnets. By the way, what's weird here isn't the events that are happening. It's the fact that they're happening in this way. It's like the infinite improbability drive from Hitchhikers. Just all of a sudden frogs fall from the sky. All of a sudden a drinking fountain drains in the wrong direction. How is this serving the cause of Beelzebub in any way? I don't know, maybe they're going for the fact that this power is warping the fabric of reality and the laws of nature aren't acting properly or something. I don't know. It's just hard not to picture the devil trying to do this shit on purpose, First I shall have the water drained down in the wrong direction, and then a man shall find a button on his shirt, and he will not explain why it is there. And after that, a little thing I call Billy Ray Cyrus. Meanwhile, we learn who the real culprit is. It's the substitute teacher, Paddock, who has the heart and eyes in a tray in her desk because if you put them in the fridge, someone else might eat them. Meanwhile, Mulder is convinced that there is some kind of repressed memory at work here, because repressed memories were big at the time. They even showed up in one of Joel Schumacher's Batman movies, which proves that it doesn't work because I still remember those films despite the trauma. But Mulder is convinced that this guy's only reason for not going along with his theory is that he must be hiding something, because what other reason is there to disagree with Mulder, right? Other than the fact that he is often ridiculous, I mean. Meanwhile, Scully has made a discovery on the internet, but since this is the 1995 internet, it's basically Zork internet. But she shows that cases like this are nothing new, that it was really just a way of bad-mouthing unpopular people before the proper internet could come along and we could just call each other Nazis instead. Anyway, Shannon, who was there during the ritual and also is the stepdaughter of Osbury, one of the cultists, is having a reaction to dissecting a baby pig the day after a guy she was with was found murdered and mutilated. She has a psychotic episode with the pig coming to life and screaming at her, which convinces Mulder that she's remembering a repressed memory. And sure enough, she spins a yarn about being molested by Osbury and being knocked up 3 times so that the babies could be sacrificed. Even her little sister being murdered for a sacrifice at age 8. Unbelievable stuff! By which I mean don't believe it, because in what I'm not sure is a plot twist or a clever attempt to poke fun at repressed memory therapy, all of that stuff is not true. Which makes sense. If a teenage girl gets pregnant 3 times and has no kids, people do not notice that shit. Even the little sister thing is crap. Her little sister died at 8 weeks of crib death. Of course, Mulder isn't going to be dissuaded by a little thing like facts or common sense, so he hassles Osbury in the kitchen.
Did you do it?
Admittedly, he seems a little uptight.
Even the devil can quote scripture to fit his needs.
Sorry, Breeze must have done that. Get out! That window is so drafty. I will consume your soul. Guy's coming by to fix this tomorrow. While he's throwing Mulder out, Shannon is making up the exam on the pig dissection, while Paddock takes her bracelet, but she uses that to perform evil magic on her, compelling Shannon to slit her wrists while grimacing in the next room, either from the power of magic flowing through her, the fact that she's holding her hand in a candle flame, or that all that heart meat has really made her horribly constipated. That's probably why she put the false memories in Shannon's head, to explain away the apparent suicide. Even the devil needs an alibi these days. Meanwhile, the cultists are worked up over this.
It wants a sacrifice.
It's been years since we've done that.
Exactly.
Chewbacca is right. This is probably punishment for their lapsed Satanism, a reminder to make up for that. But it's hard to make with the whole devil worship thing while the feds are snooping around, so they plan to blame the murder on Shannon. But Mulder and Scully are still suspicious of Paddock. Mulder because incense was burning in her office, and he knows that's used in black mass ceremonies, and with Mulder, weird trumps obvious every time. As for Scully, she says the guy Paddock is subbing for is normally the picture of health, and then suddenly comes down with flesh-eating bacteria. Because the Lord of all worms doesn't just show up to give you the sniffles after all. And Paddock seems to be just subbing without anyone remembering actually hiring her to do that. Wow. They're lucky all they got is a tool of the devil and not a sex offender. Meanwhile, Mulder is checking out Osbury's basement, where the guy shows up and admits to being part of this satanic group. But all they ever did was involve the kids in the rituals and then give them a post-hypnotic suggestion in order to make them forget about it, just so they wouldn't talk. But even though he insists that they didn't kill the boy or Shannon, Mulder says it's still his fault for calling up the demonic forces that did it. He knew the threat and created a situation where the murder happened. As he's doing this, Paddock uses the power of Scully's pen to either compel her or to imitate her, calling up Mulder to say that she's in trouble. Well, with no evidence against him and his stubborn refusal to confess to anything more than being a member of a weird religion, Mulder has to let him go. And by let him go, I of course mean handcuff him to the post and just leave, which not only sounds incredibly illegal, but he is leaving this man helpless while he has betrayed members of a cult that Mulder thinks are potentially homicidal. And let's not understate this point. While the forces of Satan stalk the area with murderous intent, locking him in a room where black rituals have been performed. Either Mulder is an incredible idiot, or he knows the threat and has created a situation where this man's murder can happen, also known as the very thing he got in Owsbury's face over 30 seconds ago. Well, surprise, surprise, while Owsbury is locked up and completely helpless, Paddock sends the class python to go eat him alive. Plus, since it's enhanced by Satan, the snake manages to eat him, digest him, and crap out or puke his bloody skeleton in 20 minutes. Even Taco Bell doesn't go through you that fast.
It would take a large python hours to consume and weeks to digest a human being.
You really do watch the Learning Channel.
The cell phones, the cars, the internet, it may all date this show, but they don't hold a candle to the idea that you could watch the Learning Channel and actually learn anything, besides your need to weep for the human race. They race to the school to find Paddock has faked an attack on herself and points them towards the cultists. She's also planted evidence on them. You'll shoot your eye out, you'll shoot your eye out. The cultists catch them unawares, and soon they're being dragged off for the sacrifice. Scully's not even struggling. She's been tied up so much, this is just part of her job now. There's probably a slew of DID fetishists thanks to this show. However, in a case of Diablo Ex Machina, Paddock uses the counselor's keys to compel him to shoot the two others and then himself, then vanishes with nothing more than a scrawl on the chalkboard. Lord may work in mysterious ways, but Satan is downright mental. This might be controversial, but this episode gets a stamp of fine. Yeah, that's a new grade. I realized I needed a stamp for episodes that represented what you expect from the series, but are better than what watchable sounds like. I know it's received a lot of praise, but frankly, I don't think it was actually anything particularly special. It had a couple clever ideas, but they didn't really pay off in a satisfying way, and the ending was a disappointment. The story ends because the devil decides to murder all members of the cult when their faith had just been rekindled. It's just a sort of an F you for losing your faith in the first place, and thereby ensuring that this generation is the end of worshippers in this town. And why all the rigmarole? Paddock could have gotten that shit over with before Mulder and Scully showed up at the school. Why waste time faking the attack when she could have finished the cultists off and gotten back in time to play poker with Hitler and Stalin? The ending is in part so that Morgan and Wong could leave that message, because it was them departing the show. They were going to go on to work on Space Above and Beyond. That's why they came back to write more in Season 4, including one of our previous episodes, Musings of a Cigarette Smoking Man. And then they went on to take over Millennium with Season 2. But we'll be going on without them with fresh bones in our next X-Files review, coming who the devil knows.
Mulder, toads just fell from the sky.
Guess their parachutes didn't open.